So thank you both for joining me. We have my partner Shanti and friend and couples coach Belinda Wiley. And Shanti and I have done 10 couples coaching sessions with Belinda, and we wanted to share a bit of a window into that, to share a bit about what it's like in our relationship, as well as what Belinda has to offer in terms of couples coaching, and how, as I really believe in the value of putting effort and energy into your relationships, both with your partners and with yourself. And so to share what that can be like. So thank you both for being here.
Ooh, it's exciting to be here.
This is Belinda's officially her 4th time on Reawakening Love and Power. She is a VIP. VIP on the mic.
Very important pussy.
Very important pussy. You got
Very important podcast pussy, yes.
Oh, VIPP.
Oh, VIPP, yeah.
So maybe we can start by sharing a little bit about what it was like when we started, because it was really when I first suggested to Shanti that we do these sessions with Belinda, I really wanted to do it. Like I really, really wanted to do it. How did you feel about the idea?
I did not want to do it at all.
And I think you could feel, because sometimes when I want to do things, there's this like really like, I need to, I want to, this energy of like, you have to do it. Come on. There's like a real pushy, needy kind of vibe that comes through sometimes.
Look, it's the same feeling that you have when you're around cats. Because like you don't want to come across as like, I really want you to do this. You want to be fair and open with your questions, and you don't want to push.
Yeah.
But you can feel the impetus. You can feel that like, I really want you to do this. And I did not want to do it. I was like, no, fuck that.
And also what he means about cats is like, I'm obsessed with cats and I'm like desperate for their attention. But I also try to play it cool, because cats get really turned off by that. And so it's a real like internal battle, and the cats still pick up on it.
Carol loves all pussy equally.
God, you too. Actually, everything you're saying makes such sense to me, because this is my experience, you know, as a coach, that often one is way keener than the other. And so one, and more often than not, is the woman in the partnership and the relationship, and the other one sort of, you can feel that they don't want to be there initially, and then once they get going, they realize, oh, okay, it's not quite. And I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about this too, Shanti. How your experience was, and how what shifted and changed maybe along the way.
I think my initial trepidation was thinking, oh, it's just going to be a bit of a gang up. I thought, Carol has a relationship with you. It's about improving me and changing the way that I am in the relationship. It's going to be, I just sort of wasn't comfortable with that idea, because I didn't know you. Carol knew you. You guys had a background together. I was worried that was what it was going to be. And I was like, oh, I don't want to be part of a room full of like people saying that I'm doing things wrong. And well, it wasn't like that, obviously. And from the first session, it was clear. I think you cleared that up from the first session, that it wasn't like that. And even I think I think in any of those dynamics, when you've got a third person involved, either Carol, myself, or whatever partner wants to draw that third person into a mediator role and bring them into their corner of the ring. And I didn't, like, you didn't go to either side of the ring. You also got rid of the ring, which was more important, because you said, and I think you said, I'm not a mediator.
Yeah.
I'm here to like create the tools for you guys to use, and not get into the minutiae or get into the nuances of your discussions. It's about me helping facilitate a growth together.
There was one moment in particular when that really came through, and it might have been our first or second session, and Shanti and I had an argument about something a day or two prior, and I felt a bit unresolved about part of it, and I brought it up in the session, like, can we, this happened, and can we kind of deal with this? And you did such a fantastic job of like, you didn't invalidate what I felt, but you were like, look, we could spend hours and hours mediating and rehashing individual arguments and not get very far. And that's kind of like for you to act as a mediator on every little argument, every little niggle, every little aspect, even big aspects of conversations, like that's kind of exhausting for everybody to do it that way. But what you did such a good job of being like, look, this is your perspective is valid, but the way that I can help you the best is if we really kind of go underneath and address the build like a stronger connection between you two, and less of these arguments will naturally arise as a result. You were really like taking us deeper to the root of things rather than solving problem after problem on the surface. Yeah. Is that
absolutely? That's such a good point you make, because I remember that moment. I totally remember that moment. And I remember thinking afterwards, I hope Carol, and I thought I did, but I hope Carol heard me, that I wasn't trying to diss that whole what you were bringing, but I thought, let's just get it going at the very beginning, because most often people will bring you everything that's not working.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's almost like the old therapy system, which a lot of people are used to going to. They go along, they say, this isn't working, this isn't doing, what should we do? Da, 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 da. Whereas I want to come in, and this is what I try to do right from the beginning. This isn't therapy, it's coaching. I'm here, you're here. I've set the container for the three of us to co-regulate together and find something that works so well for you. And I've got lots of ideas, but let's see what's going on for you, what's working now, what's not, and then we'll go from there. And so it's quite a different thing, I think, coaching, because I'm very mindful that you're two separate people, but you are a couple. And I think I brought that up right at the beginning, that you needed to make a decision that you're in this together, like both feet in, because often if one's not quite there and they never quite get there, the coaching container it doesn't quite work, really. I think you know that quite quickly in the first few sessions.
You just reminded me why I made the decision to invest. I think maybe I was out surfing, or I'm just trying to remember where I was, but I remembered that I was thinking, well, you invest a lot of time in practicing all of these different activities, in reading books, and Carol's asking you to invest time in the relationship. And I thought that was a real thing of value and something that I needed to invest in. And because it was something that Carol, you'd brought it up, you'd brought up the couples therapy and, well, not therapy, sorry, the couples coaching. And like at first, like I was like, I don't want to do it because of all the reasons I mentioned. But then I thought about it. It takes me a little bit of time to digest and think about it, and also get past the fact that you sort of like, I want to do it. And then get past that, and then understand that it's about investing in us and investing in our relationship. And I was just going to say, the way that you dealt with when that was brought up, I think that was probably one of the things I was afraid of initially was that an argument or a disagreement would come up and I'd be the bad guy. And the way that you handled it meant that I had trust in what we were doing, and that I didn't think, oh, this is a catch him out type relationship. This is about working on tools to invest in the relationship. And that's when I think it deepened my trust for the coaching sessions.
I feel like couples often have been conditioned into that right wrong thing, you know, someone's got to be always right and someone's got to be wrong. And actually, I actually think everybody's point of view is valid. And so I really hold that space. It's key, actually, because whatever you're saying is what you're feeling, and, you know, each of you. And so it's just about often just reflecting that back to you, and then each other hearing each other. I think that's the key piece that I try to facilitate. That's why I use those practices and take you through things so that you can deepen your connection and communication, because they're the key two things that often people forget to work on. They meet and it's all fabulous and it just all fits together really well, and there's, you know, excitement and turn on and all that sort of stuff. And then suddenly things start to waver a bit. And that's when you often get into right and wrong and what's wrong with me, and, you know, he doesn't get me. And then it's about bringing you back into, okay, what did you like when you first met each other? And let's just start reminding each other of those things.
Yeah. And I would say that we already had pretty good communication, relatively speaking, to start with. But there's always, it's hard, like, even though I have all of these tools in my own coaching practice, there's so much benefit to having a third party or an external person to hold that space for you and support you. And there's always more kind of honing of those communication skills. And there's something about just being held and guided by you that really makes things kind of land in a new way, and that we can practice it. Especially because when there's like emotion coming up for me and Shanti, it's harder to kind of think clearly and access, even if I know that I should pause and feel into my body and slow down when we're having a tough conversation. When I'm in that conversation and my emotions get activated, it's hard to like remember that and access that. And so having you there and being like, okay, now let's pause, feel what's happening, slow down. It kind of like helps to build that habit and that culture in our relationship in a way that I couldn't completely do for myself with just my thinking brain. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And also humans just generally, they, you know how we do, we talk, you say something and your partner says something back, but actually to have someone else sort of hear it and then offer it back to you, just succinctly or short and sweet, it sometimes just lands in the brain and, oh, I've been heard, I've been witnessed. Yeah. I think we humans really crave that, just to be seen in that moment for what we are. It's quite a key piece that coaches can offer, as you would know as a coach yourself. So same piece in couples.
And I feel like a lot of what would come up in sessions, when we would kind of talk to you about how the previous week had went or things had happened, in talking to you, I would realize, oh, we're actually doing better than I thought. Is that like reflection from someone that is so helpful, that really helps you to see things that you can't see because you're living inside them. And that other thing that you were sharing, there is the co-regulation aspect that I feel like we were able to work through some topics that are pretty charged for us, but having you there and you being like calm and present and loving and centered helped us to access that same calm, present, loving, centered kind of energy in those conversations.
Yeah, I'm really, really mindful when I work with a couple of their nervous systems, how they're relating to each other, because you can feel it. I mean, you would know in your own relationship when you're feeling riled and when you're chilled. And often you don't realize it until it's reflected back to you, or you're with somebody sitting to the side like I have been, and then you can sort of say, oh, I'm noticing I'm feeling something here, and which you may not say to your partner, but you're saying it so I can hear it as well. So yeah, it's a very powerful tool to be witnessed. I think that's what I'd keep saying, that's the piece I hold.
I was going to say also, Carol being a coach, and you've got the tools, the communication tools, and a lot of the things I think you already know, but if they come from you to me, then it creates a differential. It creates an imbalance, and if it's coming from you, then it's almost like a coach or a teacher. Whereas, like when it's coming from outside of us, then there's more room for it to be heard, particularly for me. And I think maybe for you, and I'm not going to speak for you, but I think for you, it probably just reinforces.
Yeah.
So it's like a message that you've heard before, but then you're hearing it again and you go, oh yeah, kind of clicks.
Yeah.
Like it's instead of just a tool that you have, it's a tool that you're applying at that time.
Yeah. And having the support takes the support from you, Belinda, takes the pressure off of me to be perfect and know all the answers and have all the tools.
Yeah.
Which is really helpful when I'm inside of it.
Yeah, that's a big piece. It's a really, I think, I think particularly coaching coaches, it's quite interesting because so often we just don't have that space to be heard, and in a relationship, because I'm, same for me, I'm a coach and I'm married, and my husband, it's like, I just know how he feels, because he often says to me, I haven't got the vocab, I don't have the connection and the community. I mean, he's learning lots of things with me, obviously, but, he never had it at the beginning. And so it was almost like a mismatch. Not saying you didn't have great communication skills, Shanti, because you do, but I'm just saying, just with, when you're actually a coach, you sort of tend to hone in on them a lot. So it can be a bit of a mismatch. But it clearly, between you two, it didn't take long before you just sat back and just did your thing, and I held it.
I mean, there is going to be a difference, because Carol's whole being is centered, or that's sort of the core to what you're doing. And for me, like this communication, relationship, sexuality, all of that kind of thing. And for me, I mean, it's a bit more fringe. So there's going to be a difference there. But when we come together in the synergy of a coaching relationship and that sort of triad, then I think it equals the playing field, and it takes away the Carol's a coach. It takes away what I do, and it just becomes a conversation, and not you trying to give any lessons or share any of your knowledge. It's just we're both having a conversation, and Belinda can help guide that.
Yeah, and Belinda, you do it in such a way that it's gentle and spacious, and it just feels really good to be together with you. There's not a lot of pushing, or you got to get this right, you got to fix it, you got to do it this way. It's very like, ooh, yeah, let's feel that, and make some. What are you laughing?
No, I'm just laughing because I just wanted to say moist for some reason.
We've been waiting for this.
I
was actually going to say there's been a lot of playfulness, there's a lot of lightness, and there's been the whole range of emotions, of course, as you would expect in any coaching. But there's something about lightness, which is great. And I do find this, if I generalize here, that's what guys want to do. They want to just keep it a bit light here.
Yeah.
It's always been a theme with all the couples I work with. They just want to have a bit of a laugh and a bit of a joke, and which is great, because that's what guys and girls can do it as well. Women can do it as well. But sometimes we can, this is my experience, and for myself as well, we can take things quite seriously, just generally, and forget that we're getting a bit serious about it. And then suddenly there'll be a pop-up of some sort of moist, or I don't know, something will pop up, or you'll say something like, and it just reminds everybody, time to have a bit of a shake and a bit of a giggle.
Yeah. I think the playfulness, and I remember I did a retreat with a guy called Playful Monk, and we were doing like a 3-person, I think it's a triad, and one person witnessing, another person talking, and then I think, so there was a listener, a witness, and someone talking. And I remembered how heavy, like, people were just like offloading their entire life worth of shit, and it was like, fuck, this is so fucking heavy. And just people, you can hear people just bawling in the background, and I'm like, oh God, this is so depressing. As a pun came to mind then. Anyway, I won't tell the joke. So what happened, and I talked to a friend of mine, and a really close friend of mine, and I just remember he'd done a lot of this sort of speaking, and he was talking about the same issues and getting into the same depth of conversation, and connecting with me and everything that was going on. But it was a real sense of lightness and laughter and smiles, and I was just like, oh, it's just so much more receptive to this than is like, instead of having like a 20-kilogram concrete bag just sort of beaten over your head, it was sort of like, it was more like being tickled with a feather, and allowing that space for some joy around the stupid fucking shit we think. I mean, like, it's ridiculous, some of this. I always think that we're just big children in adults' clothing, and we take these issues so seriously. We're like, my issues are so fucking important. And realistically, if we get a bit of perspective, we're like, oh, for fuck's sake, I mean, I'm such a child. And getting that perspective from a friend and just bringing that lightness, it really, it makes a difference for me personally. I won't talk for anyone else, to receive the information. Because sometimes people just, they just offload, and it's just like concrete bag. And you're just like, I'm getting crushed. And then when there's some lightness and laughter, it's like, oh, I can take this. It's just some flowers being.
You can deal with the same stuff, but it makes it much more accessible and doable and enjoyable. Yeah.
And not everyone's open to that. People, I think, some people want to take their shit fucking seriously. There's been a lot of swearing, but I don't.
It's a good point. It's a really good point that you bring up. And, everyone is very different. Some people are just used to making things quite light and jokey, depending on your upbringing and everything like that. And other people are still seriously caught up in some really heavy duty stuff, I mean, as a coach, I just, whatever is presented to me, I have to validate in that moment. It's really important. Because that's their reality in that moment. So everyone's different, but I mean, I've had some, it varies. If I think about the coaching work that I'm doing, that I've done, not everyone knows how to be light, even guys. I generalized before, but even guys can get quite heavy down on a particular subject. It's usually around,
Definitely, I agree.
I thought you said dick.
Oh, dick.
I thought you were having
just for context for people listening, before we pressed record, Shanti was having a lot of fun speaking naughty words directly into the microphone.
That's what I was thinking. I'm thinking, oh, he's bringing up dick now, so I'm going to have a laugh.
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
You said definitely. No, but my point is sometimes some of the subjects around money, but that's a good one actually. That people can get quite serious. They can get almost more serious about money than they can about sex. Like there's when we start talking about vulnerable things, sometimes that's when the lightness can come up. But when it comes to money, some people, look, both sex and money seem to be the two that people can get quite. But then it's individual. It just depends what the deal is between the couples. So
no, I don't think there's anything wrong with people taking, and that's where they're coming from. If that's the space that they're in, then and I don't criticize any of the people at that retreat that were coming at it from that angle. It's just that it was more difficult to take. From my experience, I was more open to it gave some levity to being able to bring because I didn't want to go into their story because it just felt like a shitstorm. It was like a maelstrom of like depression, and I didn't want to go in there. Whereas when it was allowed to be a bit lighter, I was like, okay, I can go into this and I can hear it more, I can feel it more, and I can be more present, and I'm not like getting the cross out and going, fuck, get away, you know, like it's easier to, and that's not, I think people come from where they come from. If people need to be that heavy, then like, you know, you're not going to criticize someone, but it was just more difficult for me to be in relation with those people and take in their message and feel what was going on for them.
Well, lightness and playfulness is one of the things that really matters to you. It's something that you really value. And that's one of the things that we wanted, you know, at the beginning when we were talking about what we wanted to get out of the coaching. Our kind of two biggest, most common conflicts are around money and household chores. And I think there was a desire with us, especially for you, I think, to be able to find that like lightness and playfulness. When we would discuss those subjects in particular.
Definitely.
And so that it was about money and household chores. And we were also wanting to, because we've been together for a little over 4 years now. We've got like a fairly solid foundation, but we wanted to bring a bit more like sparkle and aliveness back into our sexual connection too. So those were the main things that we wanted
some hot fucking.
Of course. Of course. And do you think, I'm going to ask you this question, do you think that, because this, I see this a lot, but do you think that when you are not getting on well around money and household chores and things, that has an impact on your sex life, on your intimacy?
I think 100% for me.
The heaviness of it affects, it's like a really shitty friend that hangs around and smells bad. And
good analogy. I got it.
When we were, and you helped us bring that levity, my dad described it once. I remember I was doing well in maths and I wanted to learn other subjects well and do well with those. And he said, it's like you've got a candle lit. Now you just need to move it into the other rooms and take that candle. And I think we already had the candle lit. So we already had illumination, but we wanted to then take that candle and illuminate and bring the levity, bring the lightness, good pun, to money and chores. Because I mean, fucking seriously, like
those arguments would get so heavy and so like,
but they're just so stupid.
Like emotions would go up real fast, real quick. And then it would become a thing that it was like, because money was already such a touchy subject, if it would come up again, it started to get like, it would kind of go up quicker and quicker each time.
I don't mean your arguments are stupid. I mean, like when I think about when you start getting to perspective, when you start going, oh, that 3 months ago, I had this argument with Carol about some like, did you hang out the washing? It's
God.
like, who gives a shit? Like, just hang it out. I mean, come on. It takes about 15 minutes, and you're going to have a discussion which is going to cause discomfort. Sure, it's like good to address things, but to come at it with a heaviness, it's almost like comical to get so upset about it.
Yeah. And I think the thing is that the work that we did with you, Belinda, it wasn't like, okay, so who should hang out the washing and how are you gonna blah, blah. It was like it was focused. I mean, that was like part of the reason we were doing it, but the focus was on really getting a solid connection between us and understanding on a deeper level what's like really going on with those things. And we were talking, you were saying before, Shanti, about we're just like children walking around in adult bodies.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite things that we did towards the end of the 10 sessions was when we did the process where we each met the other person's inner child. So we got to, and I think that was like so key, because when we have, like, when our arguments get heated, it is because those like younger childlike parts of us are the ones getting activated and speaking. And to be able to see that for what it is and have a shared language around it was so helpful. You agree?
Oh yeah. I mean, for me, it was less of a child. It was more my adolescent self that came up and needed some nourishment and needed to be heard.
Yeah.
Rather than the specific younger part of my childhood wasn't really a theme, but definitely that adolescent stage was.
In that time. In that
time.
moment.
Yeah.
And the thing that I loved about the way that you did it, Belinda, was like, you made it clear that we still have the primary responsibility for our own inner children, but that we were bringing it to light and sharing so that we could take care of each other in better ways, but while still maintaining responsibility for ourselves.
There's something about a couple that you come together for a reason. We don't always know why, but there's a lot of, it's quite a big subject on that one, around what we come together for. I mean, we think it's just mutual attraction. You smell good, I smell great, we're going to fuck or whatever, and then we're going to stay together. Yes, smell is actually quite important, Shanti.
He just sniffed me.
Yeah, I saw that. But actually, there's a healing that goes on. That's often the piece that people don't understand, which I often talk about. And so once you've made a bit of commitment in your relationship, you're going to start learning some things, and some things are going to pop up. And so when we go into that inner child work that you were talking about, it's much easier for an adult to relate to what a child says. Like if a child says, oh, I really need this, I really need that, and then most humans go, oh, okay, I'm happy to do that. But when an adult can say, well, I really want this and I demand it, two adults are like, well, hang on a minute, and they pull back. So the whole, when you meet each other's, and we do that over a 2-week process, is you start to see that vulnerable side, whether it's adolescence or young, it doesn't matter. It's just you're not an adult, and you didn't have the awareness. You didn't perhaps get what you needed at the time, whatever it was, from the adults around. And so this plays out in our adult relationships, and then you get two people together and they start both playing out their inner children. And if an adult couple can see this and can do this work, they're like, oh, wow. And it's like you've got someone to work with without sort of going, what the fuck, what's wrong with you? You're acting like an idiot.
Yeah.
So this way you're sort of more on a level. And this is the connection, the communication, as I talk about. And you start to see each other.
I think that's such a beautiful point too, because we do all have like an individual responsibility for our own healing and growth, but there is so much healing and growth that can happen in relationship. Like you're never going to perfect yourself, which is not even a thing. But sometimes we get this idea that like, I have to, fix this and fix that and be fully confident and all blah, blah
at all times.
Before I can have like a really good relationship.
Yeah.
And you
Such a good point.
You need to have self-responsibility. But when some of these things, like a relationship will give you the perfect opportunity to work on it and to heal it. And so like, you don't need to fix everything before being in a relationship. You just need to keep tending to the relationship, and that will show you what needs attention and what needs care.
I think that's super liberating, because I remember before, I think I'd broken up from a long-term relationship a while before we got together, and I was like, I need to fix these things before I get into a relationship. And I think for people to understand that you don't need to be 100% before you get into a relationship. I remember saying that to a friend, my very close friend, and he said to me, he said, you related to himself. He said, if I was going to do that before I got into a relationship, I would die single.
It's a very valid point. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah. Because I mean, who's perfect? I mean, I'm working on myself continually because it's just my journey and I love it. And then in my relationship, but it's not everybody's journey. Like, that some people don't even focus on it. And so we're all imperfect humans, let's face it. And it's just about, where you want to put the emphasis, if you want, what do you want together? What do you want to grow together? What are you wanting? And that's what I normally ask people. What are you wanting out of this? What do you need? What do you want to work towards? Because it's not going to happen in 10 sessions or 5 sessions, but you're going to get a hell of a lot of good tools.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it does. Like you got the feeling of what's going on. But then it's just keeping on doing those things and making them like, to me, they're life skills. Like they're relationship life skills. We didn't get taught any of this stuff, at least I didn't. Most of us only learned from usually our primary caregivers, how relationships look like. And if they had good ones or what you thought was good and you got what you needed, maybe that was okay, but plenty of people don't. So as an adult, it's up to you to take some responsibility and not blame and shame anyone.
I wanted to make 2 comments on that, because when the thing about being a teenager, I remember when we were introducing the inner child and you're talking about you can hear more from an inner child. I remembered when I first described my inner child, it was in a bit of a deprecating way. I said a petulant, emo, whingy teenager.
Yeah.
And then throughout that, when we were doing the listening and the witnessing and all of that, I grew to really understand where that, because I had this silly idea of what teenage boys are like, and then myself, and not a very positive relating to that side of myself. And then when you're speaking about the example of relationships that we were modeled, I remember in one of my first relationships, mostly an adult, basically an adult, around 18. And I remembered that I thought the way that you had discussions was to yell at each other, because that's kind of what was modeled. It was not the sort of back and forth of listening to each other and being heard. It was like, to get your point across, it needed to be shouted. And it's been a big journey from then to now, but it's true. We don't all have that language.
We don't. That's why this work is profound.
Yeah.
That's what, just imagine if this is part of what I love about it, is imagine if, people hear this podcast and because a lot of people say to me, I didn't even know people like you existed. Like, people know about therapy. They know about therapy. Something's wrong we go to that person. Often it's a mediator type person, and they just keep spiraling down into, you know, this is not working and make each other wrong, and someone's listening, and you're just going nowhere. Sometimes people just need to be heard and witnessed for who they are and what's each person in front of the other one, but in a way that they have to learn to listen. And that's why, you know, I give you those practices whereby I teach you how to take time, to even put a timer on. You know, it seems sometimes for people it's a bit sort of clunky and, you know, and sort of a bit too automated, but actually once you know how to do it, you don't have to put the timer on. But it's like giving each other time to speak without being interrupted. Because as you just said, Shanti, you know, if you've learned or had modeled that you have to get your point across by being yelled at or just going for it, and yeah, I had a similar experience too. That's what you do. And so this is like showing you a whole new way, which you have to practice. You have to practice new things if you want new results.
I feel like the thing that you help us do is to create a culture within the relationship, like a way of relating to ourselves and each other. And that culture feels really supportive and healthy, and like there's a good foundation that I feel like if more things come up, that we can handle them without getting as intensely activated, that we can kind of stay connected to each other and like heart to heart through that.
I think,
does that make sense?
Yeah, of course it does. I think, and just I'm going to move with your point when you're saying when we become activated. There's been a few times where it happens, and I think it's difficult to stop once it gets started. It's like in meditation they talk about like a train or a locomotive. I think locomotive is the feeling of a freight train. There's a lot of weight behind it. It gets a lot of inertia, and when we start down that road of getting irritable and not communicating, then what we've been able to do more recently, instead of letting the train get into full speed and it'll just plow through all the snow, the trees, it'll just run over everything, and it'll derail before it stops because it's on full speed. We've been able to just remember a couple of practices and just pause and short circuit, and the train still rolls on for a little bit, but it slows down. That it brings that space, like it stops that train from getting too far down the road, and then there's some space to communicate. One of the practices Belinda gave us, and I thought was probably one of the things that I really enjoy to practice when we're communicating, and sometimes I just do it with you, and I've remembered it a couple of times, is to give 2 minutes of explanation and then a few breaths before we respond, so we're not reacting. And it gives that time to take the charge out of the language, because you can hear a point and it can go and then if you just like take a couple of breaths and sort of ground you a bit, and also giving the time for you to finish your sentence, it just gives that, it just takes you can still express yourself and give the whole idea of what's going on for you, and you can do it in a way that's not so charged, and it's not going to be hurtful or in something that can be heard by your partner.
I remember now this is a beautiful point, and leads me on to saying, you were talking about the culture, you're creating this culture within your relationship. You know, I mean, you've both come from your own backgrounds, your own primary caregivers, and you learned those sorts of things, and now you're creating what you want. You know, you've got those pieces, you take what you want, and then you're creating some new stuff. And I think that's what excites me about this coaching, this is changing people's lives. You're creating a whole new model for your family or whatever, or the people in your world. And this is going to change the world. You know, like I don't know how else to say it. It's powerful, isn't it, when you start doing something different? Because what you were doing before wasn't working, wasn't getting you the connection, the love, the sex, or whatever, the passion. And now you're doing some new things. You're experimenting and trying on the things that work for you, like you mentioned, Shanti, and doing more of it. That really, just gives me a lot of, my heart just feels really expansive when I hear that.
Yeah.
The kookaburras are joining in on the podcast.
Are they?
Yeah, I hope that they don't cover over what you just said, because it
No, they won't.
Okay.
But just the birds are chattering.
They're excited too. I love kookaburras.
Yes,
they're bringing the levity.
They're into it.
Yeah,
The levity.
They are. They're bringing the levity. Yeah, I love the kookaburras.
I feel like that is really important work, because I think as humans, it's one of our most deep core desires to be truly intimate with other human beings, to be seen for who we are and loved and accepted in that. That's like one of the deepest yearnings that we have. And it's so beautiful to be able to cultivate that in our relationships, and the things that we learn in the coaching in our kind of like romantic partnership. Those things kind of still apply in my friendships and in my relationships with my family and that sort of thing. I do feel lucky that my parents modeled for me. I saw that they would put effort in to their relationship, that they would take time out and devoted to that and work on it. And that is one thing that I'm very grateful for, having that modeling. And that's one of the things that I'm taking and building on in my own life. We've talked a bit about the kind of conflicts and around money and chores and communication and connection. There was also the aspect that we worked on around finding that kind of sexual spark again. And that I think they're related, though, especially I'll speak for myself in that when we have a good, like, heartfelt communication and connection, I feel more attracted to you. That's like, if we've had a disagreement, it takes me a while to bounce back to want to connect again. But
you definitely don't want makeup sex.
It's not, some people are into it, but for me, it's like, no way. I need to feel safe and connected again before I'm interested in that.
That makeup sex thing is very interesting, isn't it? That is a really interesting, because I'm not into that either. Well, it's not what turns me on. So, yeah, I don't know. I haven't really.
I think attachment styles probably have.
I think that's a big piece to it. Yeah. I think right.
Well, I thought maybe because anger is such a potent energy. I don't think it's a negative energy, and I think bringing anger. I think if you could positively bring anger into sex, it'd be pretty fucking hot.
That's interesting.
Right?
You could like alchemize that energy and harness it.
Well, it's just like if you ever peer into and really sort of put it under the microscope, what anger is, it's a mix of stuff, but it's a very potent and intoxicating emotion. And if you could bring that into sex, it'd be pretty.
Obviously, you don't mean in like a physically hurtful way.
No, I mean
energy of the fire of it, and like explain a bit more about what you mean.
Well, say you can go in. There's varying degrees of anger. There's sort of annoyance and irritation, and then it goes to anger, and then rage, and it can go as far down the rabbit hole as it wants. But I mean, the bodily energy. If you get angry, you try and go to sleep, or try and do anything and try and rest. You can't, because you're so fidgety. But if you can, I guess, synthesize or funnel that energy of anger into a sexual experience.
You can.
It'd be, I like the word alchemize. Alchemize is a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is possible. That's definitely possible.
Direct it.
To turn it around into a sexy sort of.
Yeah, it'd be.
Yeah, you can flip it.
It'd be pretty fiery. I don't know if that's what BDSM is. I've not done bondage stuff, but or pain and masochism and all. You know, well, I mean, BDSM is masochism, but just that different, that rechanneling, you know, diverting that river of anger into something like sex could be. Not that we've tried that, but
what it makes me think of actually is, if anyone listening, if you're like kind of curious about this, go back and listen to the episode I did on emotions with B, because she is a magician.
Mistress.
Yeah, of working, alchemizing the energy of emotions in that way, and you'll get a feel for like how you can harness that. She's incredible. I remember like having that conversation with her and just being like, oh, the possibility. It's really exciting.
Yeah. Also, Carolyn Elliott, I've forgotten her work. I've just gone blank.
Existential kink.
Existential kink. Yeah. She talks a lot about that. And you're angry and flipping it around. Yeah. So it's definitely possible. But you know, we're all got different
flavors.
Different ways that we operate, and generally, you know, for me, obviously, I've been in a marriage for 37 years. I've been with my partner for 40 years, and so, you know, we're in our 60s and 70s. So, and been together the whole time, like in a monogamous heterosexual relationship. So, there's still so much. It still blows my mind that there's still so much possibility to play with around sexuality and sensuality. Like it's just so many things you can play around with. I mean, anger's one, and I'm still working with the heart and the pussy and the, you know, and sort of just experimenting and playing, you know. So it's wide open.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Belinda, what you would share about keeping that sexual spark alive after 40 years?
I think the first word that comes, which you've already mentioned, is playfulness.
Yeah.
I've really noticed I've had to get lighter, a lot lighter around it, and a lot more playful and experimental, a lot of experimenting. And my husband is up for it. Yeah. He was a little bit, well, what's wrong with the way we're doing it? And I'm like, well, you know, it's not working for me. You know, it's not like there's nothing wrong with you. Yeah. It's just like, I obviously need something different. So let's try and, you know, are you up for trying different things together? And he is, and he was. And so that's where it goes. I think just being open to shift and change and look at doing different things. Because once again, I just don't think anyone is taught how to have orgasmic, blissful sex. I mean, when I grew up in the 50s, I mean, it wasn't even talked about, for God's sake. Well, not in the people that I ran, you know, the people that I ran with. No one really talks about it. And even today, no one, I mean, in my world, in the coaching world, we talk about it all the time. Yeah. But just generally, you know, people aren't sort of saying, oh, hey, how was your day? And did you have an orgasm last night? And what did you do? Did you have a blowjob? Did you have a hand job? You know, like, no one's talking openly like that. You know, I mean, I can do that sort of couch come home with my coaching friends. Yeah. And people yet are so freaking curious. Yeah. They want to be able to talk about it, but society has put they've actually made it really difficult. There's so much conditioning around being too sexual, particularly women. Yeah. Because that's how we all brought up. You know, it was just too dangerous, actually, to show all of that sexual self. Yeah. And still a lot of women feel like that.
To the patriarchy.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I got in my jab at the patriarchy.
Smash the patriarchy.
But it's just a system. It's nothing against men. It's a system that that's been around for thousands of years that we've all lived under. And there's a shift and a change and a crack. Yeah.
I mean,
cracks in the system. We can hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, we can see the
Yeah, you can see it.
We can see the issues with, you don't need to be a woman or a man to see the issues that come from an unbalance or an imbalance between the two energies and the sexes, and one being held down and one being popped up. You can see it in the way that, like, men are good in certain ways and women are good in other ways. Like, we have differences and we have similarities, but propping up only one idea has led to a lot of things being sort of perpetuated, like environmental damage and disconnection from, particularly for men, emotions, disconnection from.
It's a huge piece.
And it's still very prevalent, and you see it in kids still, that a lot of things have changed since when I was in high school. You know, homophobia is significantly less, and you talk about sexuality, and the kids of the new generations are more open to it, but still there's that idea of a man, and this is what a man is, and a man doesn't cry, and a man is not talking about emotions, and let's not talk about that shit, you know. It's just suck it up, and you get a bag of concrete in you and drink some water and harden the fuck up.
Don't be a pussy.
Don't be a pussy. Exactly.
It's still around, but there is way more conversations now about it, and also a lot of people, even I notice with my own adult sort of kids in their 30s, you know, they might hear their father say the odd thing that sort of sounds slightly derogatory, and they just have them on straight away, you know. And Dennis, my husband's actually really obviously been married to me, you know, I'm catching him and pulling him up all the time. But there are a lot of men of that age group, 60s and 70s, and obviously that's the crowd that we hang out with, and they are still really tight, like really like.
It's in their body.
It's just ridiculous. Why should I be different? Why, you know, what's all this me? And they're still anti the Me Too, and you know, everyone's trying to make us all wrong. Now we don't even know what to say, and there's all this sort of real victimhood thing going on, which is sort of interesting. So that's what I notice in some of our groups. They're not our closest friends, but it's just generally around still, but it's shifting.
They are the prolific commenters on news articles, and particularly around transgender, around rape, around women's rights, pay gap, equality, and all of those things.
Racism, everything.
And there's this stoic, sort of stubborn position, like I shall not be moved. And
absolutely.
I think in certain circumstances, to be stoic, to be stubborn, and to be held to your beliefs is a good thing, but also leave some room to be open and to hear other ideas. But I think in this situation, and particularly the toxic ideas that have been affecting all men, and you know, the men are having heart attacks, they're unhealthy, they don't, you know, for some men, the thought of doing some yoga is still such an odd thing. And I stretch every time before I go for a surf, and you still get people just, their minds are blown that you would do some stretching. It's like, that's what women do. You know, this fucking old, this I'd say crusty. It's such, and that's what it is. It's a totally crusty idea that, like, and those are the same guys that end up injuring their shoulders, their knees. They have heart attacks because they drink piss and they eat heaps of meat, and they're all anti-vegan and fucking, and they break up their marriage because they can't communicate with their wife. I see them. They're like, oh, fucking veganism and, oh, you know, this anti-racism and like, there's no patriarchy, and I treat women with respect, and then like there's no communication with their wife, and then no communication with their body. It's just this like, this is what it is to be a man.
Yeah, and I mean, for those men, I just almost feel I can sort of see they're in a lot of pain. You know? They're in a lot of pain because they are, as you said, holding on. It's almost like they're holding on to the life buoy because it's everything they've known, and like it's like the world's shaking for them, and that's what people do. They hold on tighter and almost get more vehement. But I'm sort of laughing now. And then I get a lot of people saying, "Oh, we haven't got a problem in our sex life. You know, no, we're all good." And then you can see them; they're all venomous towards each other. You know, they're just so angry, and it's like, "Woo, really?" Well, maybe they're getting off on anger. I don't know what they're getting off on. So a lot of people just really struggling with almost not being honest about what's really, truly going on for them. And and a lot of people get to a stage in their life and they're like, well, this is how it is. I saw my parents doing it. They were unhappy, whatever.
Massively.
It's a big piece. If your parents were unhappy and they were yelling and fighting until they were 60 or 70 or 80 or when they died, well, you know, it sort of normalized it for a lot of people. Well, actually, I'm not buying into that. No way. I've changed it all for my whole family. That's what I look at. Even though I feel it feels a bit edgy for the way I live my life now, and where I live, I don't know that everybody gets it, but I don't care because I actually know this is the new way. I started doing yoga 35 years ago and it was woo-woo back then. 35 years ago it was woo-woo, and I was teaching lawyers, top, the partners in law companies. And I remember one of them saying to me, "Oh, we really love this, but can we call it something else?" I'm like, "You can call it what you like, but it's yoga." Because they didn't want to tell anyone. They felt embarrassed because they were getting jibed all the time. Their bloke mates were saying, "Oh, what the fuck are you doing yoga for? Oh, you probably you pussy, whatever. I don't know." And yet they knew it was good. So that's 35 years ago. So I'm hoping that I keep talking about sex, or we all, as many of us can, and that it will sort of make it easier to talk about, and people will be all going to sex coaches or whatever.
What do people usually, when you're working with couples, Belinda, what do people usually come to you with? Like, what are the main things that they're experiencing and wanting to work on?
Just they've lost their spark more often than not. Some of the more, like I've worked between 20s up to about 60s, and the older ones we've lost our spark, and we're just roommates, we're flatmates, and it's like we're a bit sad. The younger ones, more about the connection. They've got this sort of sex going, but then they've got these issues in the house. And that's sort of building up resentment. The resentment builds up because you're not connecting and communicating, and then it falls into the bedroom. Not totally, but they haven't got quite that far down. But once you're in your 60s and the resentments build up, it's affecting the bedroom. Sex life.
I just wanted to circle back on what Belinda was saying about those men, and with that sort of patriarchal idea, and in a lot of pain. And you can see, because they don't have the practices. They're not being taught mindfulness or how to deal with emotions, emotional intelligence, that they get the divorces, and then you're ending up with a lot of men committing suicide, or not committing suicide, taking their own life. And I don't like the word committing, because I think that it associates it with a crime, but taking their own life. And because they don't have those skills, and because they're so stuck in a mindset, they're clinging. So like you said, their world's shaking, they're gripping onto the toxins, which are the whole thing, which is causing a lot of the issues, the division in society, the disparity, the problems with their wife, with their siblings, and being so close to that, it's hurtful to anyone to cling on to toxic ideas and not be open.
And the other piece, just to add to that, is that, and this is my experience working with some men, it's very, they feel very embarrassed in front of they admit it eventually, there's a sense of, I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm doing. Because that's part of the conditioning of a man to be in charge. That's that system, the patriarchal system. Man's in charge, I'm the breadwinner, I'll do it all. I'm not saying there's anything right or wrong about that system, because it's all shifting and changing now. But if that's your upbringing and conditioning, you know, and then your wife says, well, actually, I'm not that happy. Can we do something about it? Naturally, they're going to go, I've done something wrong. Something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've got it wrong. This is often what's internalized.
Yeah.
And then, oh my God, I don't want to do coaching because that's really going to show me up. And then I'm going to look like more useless than I think I already am, or now I'm feeling. They may not have been noticing it before, but as soon as a third person like a coach comes in, so there's a lot of that. So, I mean, I'm noticing that when we were talking right at the beginning, you said that you were a little bit, you didn't really want to do it, Shanti, you know, and yet Carol was keen, and but then you sort of had a shift of like, oh, I can see I wasn't taking sides for a start. And also, I don't think there was any shaming, because I didn't get the impression that you felt like anything was really wrong with you per se. But I was meaning some of the older men that I've coached with, they're a little bit more conditioned. Yeah, is what I was just trying to get that piece.
Yeah, massively.
You do such a beautiful job, Belinda, of holding that space and making it feel like it's not like one person versus the other and who's right and who's wrong, but really just that, like, how can we find our way back to each other? Oh, my darling.
Yes.
What are some of your favorite results that we've had from working with Belinda?
I think it's hard to narrow it down. And I'll go a bit general because I can't think of specific.
Okay.
What I think, and no, what I know we've been given is a strengthening, sort of like a hardening of tools. Do you know what I mean? Like you have a piece of steel and it's quite malleable, and it's sort of, there's been a hardening of that steel to the toolkit, so that the spanner's a little bit more solid and we can turn the bolts a bit easier. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's just funny that you use such a tool-oriented response.
It's just
analogy.
I mean, it's exactly what the tools are, right? Like it's just a tool, and we've been given a lot of things which bring spark in our sexuality, like the sacral support. I was struggling with that one, and some of the other practices that we've done with Belinda is sort of together. I mean, Belinda wasn't part of those practices, and then the communication parts, to giving more space, and so I think one part is a deeper understanding of where each other, and including myself, is coming from with that inner child, and then the inner child work, and then with you understanding where you're coming from with the inner child work, and also with where you're coming from in that moment as well. So the mixture of those two things, plus the communication tool. So I think really we had tools, we just didn't always apply them. And that's what I mean by that hardening, that tampering of the steel to become a tool that is used more often, rather than one that's a little bit, when we get into a difficulty that we go to turn the nut and we've forgotten about the tool, and it's sort of like flopping around the nut. It's not.
There's traction.
Yeah, there's traction. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. There's definitely traction. The wheels are on the bus.
I think I mean I agree with all of that, but I'm finding that we are arguing less. Like there are certain things that I notice myself tense up and worry that you're about to get upset with me about something and you just don't. Or like when we have to figure out, it's time to do some house cleaning. It just like doesn't escalate. We just kind of deal with it.
Yeah, there's more owning of our own emotions around those things.
Yeah.
And also, so there's that ownership. We're taking like radical responsibility, right? Taking ownership of our own and then communicating better and allowing space for not just getting impatient and just saying like, just do it. It's more like there's more malleability around it.
Yeah. And I really love the sacral support practice, and that's one of the, like, it really helps us connect to that spark in the sexual energy
And orgasms.
Yeah.
And cervical orgasms.
Yeah.
Cervical. That can be foreplay, that one.
The sacral support, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it really helps me because sometimes it takes me a while to get turned on, and I get in my own head about it, and then it's kind of a feedback loop that it gets harder and harder. And the sacral support practice is something, it just works for me. It gets me turned on and feeling like excited to connect sexually.
Yeah, and you tease with it sometimes. You're like, let's do sacral support, and then you might not just do sacral support.
Yeah. The unknown, who knows? The invitation to play.
Makes it more like, it makes it less of like, you're like, it's not, it doesn't become a homework when it's like that. It's like, there may be a treat here.
It's like home play.
Yes.
Playfulness, you see, that's that whole piece.
Yeah.
That I want to bring in, is that you get to play with each other and find the things that you love that turn you on, and they're different. You know, we've all got different things, so at least you can play together and experiment.
Yeah.
Massively.
Yeah, it's definitely brought that playfulness and lightness back into some of those areas. Like you said, Belinda, sex and money can get a bit tense and serious. It's brought some of that playfulness back.
Yeah. That's life, right? Like sex is life, and money is shelter and food.
Yeah.
So it's
survival.
It's survival.
Absolutely. That's right.
Yeah.
That's why they can lighten each other up.
Belinda, can you tell us a little bit about how people can work with you? And then we have one last question. Okay.
How you can work with me is I've got a website, which is basically needs a bit of an update, but you can book in with me. Its best way is to just book in a call with me. If you're listening and you're a woman and you're thinking, I'd be curious and I'm not sure about my partner or husband, just book in anyway, because it just means you get to speak, about what's going on for you, and I can say, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking. But I do work in 6-month containers. So that's what I do. I work one-on-one with a couple.
You really need that time, I think.
Yeah.
6 months, absolutely. I've tried smaller containers and different things, and honestly, to get that real depth, and mind you, it depends where you're at in your relationship too. Yeah. I think coaches. Sorry.
How many months was it, Belinda?
What?
How many months do you work in?
6. Oh, 6. 6. I know. Look, this is the Australian New Zealand thing. Yeah.
Sorry.
Then you'll ask me about
sorry.
No, I'm not
dancing or dancing. Yeah, 6 months. 6 months. 6 months I work in. So you can find me. I've got a website. I'm also got a Facebook group called Dull and Deprived to Radiant and Thriving. I'm sure Carol will put the links in below.
We can put links in the episode description.
But the first step is just really to have a call and talk about it and see what's not working for you and what you really do want. And often that can be the hardest thing for people to do, is to actually get that peace, that help. That's often the piece that holds everyone back. And so I always say, is what you're doing working for you? If it's working and you've got the best sex life and you're really happy in your relationship, that's great. But if it's not, you have to make a decision that you want something different, and then you have to take action somehow, one way or another.
Yeah, it's so helpful to get support from another person. I think I want to normalize that.
Yeah.
One thing I would mention about, from a male perspective of the coaching, is to I think there's a lot of stigma for men. No, there is a lot of stigma. I don't think there is a lot of stigma for men around couples therapy, divorce, all of those kind of thing. We're told that we're supposed to be amazing lovers, and we're not told anything about sex. And you're supposed to be giving your partner, 2 to 3 orgasms per sexual experience, and all of these things. And I think that stigma, and then also being told we have to be all of these things, can make it difficult for men to want to come to the coaching. I think even a reframing around the coaching, that it's about investing. It's not about changing the person. It's about investing in the relationship, and giving, from my own perspective, giving some space for, and it might be the woman that's not as keen, but I would say usually the men, giving some space for them. Actually, I don't want to say men and women, because this might not just be for men and women, but just giving some space for the partner that might be more reluctant in that relationship to process, to think about it, to see the pros and cons in their own mind, and then let them come to a decision.
Yeah.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So to finish, everyone, in your challenge, in one sentence, what's one thing that you would like people to take away from this conversation? I think for me, it's that normalizing of getting support from someone else. And that's not a failure or a flaw. That's just like, dude, we need support to live life. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Well, I just reiterate the point that I made, that men are often not given the tools, and that's what it is. You're just not provided the toolkit. Sometimes you have a few tools missing to develop that close and intimate relationship with your partner, and that there's no issue. You're not less of a man. You don't need to harden up. You're not a pussy. You're not stupid. You're somebody that could benefit from some coaching and just some wisdom that's come from other people, and a sharing in a space. You're not going to be wrong in that space. And it might be that your partner doesn't have the skills as well. And it's just coming together in a synergy, not coming against each other. It's a synergistic, that's the right word, yeah? Synergistic experience that brings an elevation of the relationship. It's not about one versus the other, or you being wrong. It's about coming both together and individually, learning and developing and bringing openness and love.
Beautiful.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Of course.
I just want to say thank you, not only for doing the coaching work with me, but for having me on this podcast. And I was just thinking to myself, what's come out of it for me is that actually the magic, the shift in someone's relationship happens the moment you both say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is often the hardest piece to get to.
Yeah.
And I agree with what you were saying, Shanti, about that, the whole, doing therapy or couples, sort of people are very, very hesitant, because it's almost like, oh my God, are we going down the divorce route? Or, oh my God, does this mean it's over? Oh my, it's not even about that. It's that piece that you said about investing. And when people decide to invest and with time and money, or either or both or whatever it happens to be, they are literally saying yes, and they're activating something. We don't actually know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
But you've actually, it's like a huge honoring of yourself. Yeah. Yourself individually and you as a couple. So
exactly. You get coached in sports, you get coached in school. Why not? Get coached.
Everything.
You're not taught at all. There is no curriculum around managing relationships and emotional intelligence, connecting with yourself. There's no curriculum. It's just like, oh, that's too hard, and it's a little bit edgy and fringe. It's fucking ridiculous that it's fringe, but it's a bit edgy, and we don't know how to give the skills for that. And coaching, you're getting coached in something that is such a foundation.
Super good benefits, like a lot of pleasurable benefits from it. Super.
Lots of good sex.
Lots of great sex, and
great sex, not good sex.
And great sex. Great sex, right. Good sex, and lots of fun and laughter and lightness. The bonus. This has been so fun. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both for both being a part of our couples coaching container and for having this conversation. I really hope that people listening find something from it that lights them up with some new insight and inspiration.
Can I do a sign off?
Go for it.
When you come to the well-fucked wife, you will learn how to fuck better, how to relate better, and how to have a better relationship while fucking yourself in all aspects. Ooh, well-fucked wife, come and be with us. That's the best one. Take that one.
That is so good. You might have to send me a soundbite of that because it's so fucking good. It's nice having a guy. It's so nice having a guy do it.
It was well worth the several attempts.
It was fabulous.